Yeah, if it doesn't find the data necessary, then it will go to the server and get you the data. That's why it's, it's better to use these two. But be careful with that, because remember, you are getting from your cache, the data here might be different from the data, on the database. It could be new. By the way, it can detect added entities. It's added, but it's not yet in the database. This sometimes could be a good idea. Some other times it could be a bad idea. So just make sure to understand how this is working.
Is this a possible way to make the caching and synchronize with the database?
Of course, you can call the save changes anytime. That's one way. It will synchronize everything. Or you can simply, remember the tracking options.
Yes.
Because when you're reloading, it will overwrite whatever you have. So you can do that if you want to, depending on which one you want to win. The one on your cache or on the database. Yeah, all the optimistic concurrency, pessimistic concurrency stuff, and who wins, they are all possible with Entity Framework. You can read more about them. I'm not sure this looks small. Anyway, this is about compiled query. I don't even think it will be readable. Let me try and see it in here. Still. Anyway, the point with compiling your query is like this. You can compile, a query like saying customer equals 3, but this doesn't make sense. You want to compile a query that is waiting for your parameters, right? So that the second time I'm calling it for a different parameter, I will still use the compiled version. If you want to do that, then the simple idea, I'm not going to explain it in detail, but you can create it in a separate, function, and saying, please compile this. Compile this query. The next query, please compile it, and where the total do is bigger than this, which is a parameter. Now, in your normal code, whatever code you're using, whenever you need it, you just say, invoke this, and send my context, and send the parameter I need. The point, you don't have to understand the exact code, but just the idea is you have it somewhere where you can cache your queries the next time to run faster. The Entity Framework will try caching, but it's not as effective as you saying, please cache it from start. Okay, so this is also one way to improve performance in your Entity Framework application. Okay. Some very quick tips also, talking about NTIR. Remember, Entity Framework is usually concerned more with the data access layer, right? If you're planning on using Entity Framework with, with NTIR applications, then a very good candidate is your WCF. Okay, using WCF with Entity Framework, you will get, really. I think I really like the architecture of using them both together. One more thing is, as you saw in all the examples I showed you about Entity Framework, I never open a connection. So what happens is every time the Entity Framework opens a connection and then closes it, right? You can specify this explicitly. And this is a good idea. If you're planning on calling 4 or 5 times some statement, then create a connection, link it to your context, open it, finish your statements, and whenever you finish, close it. This also improves performance a lot. Okay? People start getting lazy when they use Entity Framework. Make sure not to do that. One more thing, which I find many people suffering from. If I have a table like customer, which has a column called, in this example, I think it was resume. Yeah, resume, or let's say picture. I've got this question a couple of times. People asking me, the problem is when I'm selecting, in many cases, it just loads the other column, which is a big column, picture. It makes your query, not as fast. How can I avoid that? In many cases, especially if you are just loading the object. Well, you can do that by, usually it's 3 ways, but I just gather them in 2. You can either use the constructor you saw from. When you say from, select, you can just pass the area where you're supposed to select that column. Just put empty string or whatever to ignore it. Another way is to use execute store command, the one I showed you. Use the select statement you really need. But a very good idea, if you're a fan of entity framework, is to move the property from this entity to another entity. You get the idea? If I have this customer and there's a column called picture, you can drag it to another object called customer picture. Now, this means that whenever you're loading, remember lazy loading? It loads only the entity, right? It doesn't load the other entities related. So whenever you're loading it, it ignores loading your picture. This is what I'm telling you, that lazy loading could be good. In some cases, it's good to use it. The point is to understand how it's really working, the entity framework. If you do that, you will get much better performance then. By the way, there are many other performance tips I could give. But the best thing, as I told you, is that in 3.5, in version 1 entity framework, things were really bad. I really didn't recommend entity framework to anyone. It was just a crappy version. Version 1 didn't work really as it should. But in version 4, everything, the compilation, the generating the views, and at runtime, everything became much better. So you are not suffering as much. That's why the old tips that I used to give are now, the list is shorter, a lot shorter than before. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show you here is about 4.1. 4.1, I think there were like 5 CTPs about that. That's why I'm surprised nobody heard about it. You have 2 new features. One is the DB context I just told you about. Remember DB context.find? Right? It just gives you the, in a very easy way how to access your database. So DB context is one way, and the other, or one feature, I'm sorry. The other feature is code first. Now you can really use code first. I want to show you how this code first works. By the way, how many here are, you have C# and VB. I think most of you are C#, right? People like me are becoming a rarity. I work with both, but I prefer VB. So I have this project in both languages, so I'm opening the one with C#. So you can let me just delete these. The example I'm going to show you is very simple. I just created a console application. Okay, console application. And as you can see, there's one important thing you should do. First of all, install the Entity Framework 4.1. And you should add a reference here to these two, Entity Framework. It will be installed, I think, in your program files folder. So when adding a reference, you have to go to program files. You will find Microsoft IDEO.NET Entity Framework 4.1. You will find the library there. Add it. And of course, add system.data.entity. After adding these two, this application will work. And you can find it, by the way, in MSDN, a very similar example to what I'm showing you right now. So what I'm doing, I'm not sure about you, but to me, when I first tried it, it was really a surprise. Even though I'm more of a database first approach, but I really liked the way. Can you see this class? Category, and you have bigger. Is this better? Okay, so you can see this class. This is pretty simple, right? Category ID and name. Anybody can do that. You see, one of the things is, you heard about the term POCO? P-O-C-O? You will hear it a lot. Plain old CLR object. Okay? So the way I used to program with ADO.NET, I create my own classes, right? And then I link them to other layers and connect to the database. The problem when Entity Framework came, people assumed that they're going to throw their classes and just replace it. But that's not true. especially with code first. You can have your own classes and just link it to Entity Framework. And that's what I'm doing right here.